Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. First of all, if this is the first video you've watched from me and you like book recommendations, you like reading, feel free to stick around. I do new book reviews almost every day. I try to do them every day. I do my best. So if you're looking for some reading inspiration this summer, stick around. Now let's talk about the book of today's video, and that is Volume 8 in the series No Matter How I Look at It, It's You Guys' Fault, I'm Not Popular by Nico Tanigawa. This is what the cover looks like. We have our main character Tomoko right here and all these girls with her because Tomoko is experiencing the manga classic, the anime classic I'm sure too, the class trip. So let's talk Volume 8. I'm going to assume that if you're watching a video on Volume 8 of a series, you are at least familiar with the story up to Volume 8, or you don't mind if I spoil some stuff that happens in the previous volumes. This is your warning if you, for some reason, do not want to know what happens. But we have been following our main character, Tomoko, for a while now. In the first seven volumes, we have come to know her as a very isolated and lonely high school girl. Tomoko went into high school thinking she was going to rock it. She had played a lot of video games when she was a high school girl, and she thought she was going to get the boyfriend, get the friend group, be popular, be cute, and just kill high school basically. And reality didn't quite match the fantasy. Tomoko is very lonely, she's very awkward, she is socially isolated, she definitely has a lot of anxiety and probably a twinge of depression mixed in there too. So in my opinion, she's probably a little bit more realistic and a closer representation of what some high schoolers feel like than the version that Tomoko was imagining. However, that doesn't make life easier for Tomoko, as she is without a solid friend group at the beginning, she's isolated from her classmates, and she's kind of letting life pass her by without making the most of it, and really struggling to fit in. I feel like the teenage years are a time where you really want to fit in and you really want to find a good group of people to stick with, so the fact that Tomoko doesn't have that is especially painful for the time of life that she's in. However, this series is definitely the champion of slow growth. Tomoko has been making incremental progress. She reconnected with a friend from middle school. She has made a friend of sorts in the school that she goes to, so she has a little group of 3. Her summer vacation for second year, because she's in second year already, went much better, and now she's on the class trip. Now, while Tomoko has been growing, Tomoko has not arrived, and probably will never arrive, because what is arriving? You're always growing through life. And in this sense, Tomoko doesn't have a super strong friend group. She still feels like an outsider. She still feels like she has no friends, even though I would say that her situation is changing slowly but surely. She hasn't quite caught up, and she is very stressed about this class trip because the first part is going to be choosing groups. Tomoko has a homeroom teacher who is sort of looking out for her. I feel like the homeroom teacher has a very heavy-handed approach, but isn't about to let Tomoko slide, so forces her to pick a group. Tomoko just says, throw me in with whoever is left, and sure enough, she gets thrown in with whoever is left. Our main character, Tomoko, tends to put up this facade where she projects how she feels about herself onto other people. So she's like, well, obviously all these people aren't fun, they're losers, they're the other misfits and outcasts, so obviously they're boring and awful as people. She's casting what she secretly feels about herself up as a facade, a protection mechanism against others, which is something that she's done in the previous 7 volumes, and it is a coping mechanism, but it usually puts her further in the hole than she would have if she had just been open and honest about how she felt. But she's a teenager, so we're gonna cut her a lot of slack because learning how to deal with your emotions is something that you have to do as a teen, and Tomoko has not mastered that skill yet. So they are on this class trip, and Tomoko feels isolated, she feels alone, even though she's with a group of other people. One of the girls in the group doesn't want to be there at all. She has a bunch of other friends. She just couldn't be in a group with them because there was a group max limit for the number of people in a group, so she basically is just bailing on the group. One girl is in because she's also kind of an outcast, but she has more cultivated that identity intentionally. There's another girl who's in just because she got into a fight with her original friend group, so she's kind of on the outs with the friend group right now. So it is kind of a collection of interesting people, but for those of you who don't know this series is a reread for me. I haven't read this series entirely through, but I was reading the series and got through the mid-teens before I wound up moving, switching library districts, having to cancel all my holds at one library, and just the stress of moving put me off my game, so now I'm rereading this series. So while I don't know exactly how the series ends, I have read through all of this before, and I do know that if you've been reading the series and you find it really dark and you feel like the growth is really incremental and the reward just isn't there, if I remember correctly, this class trip, this is where things really do start to turn around for Tomoko as a person. She's still a little awkward, she's still a little weird, she still does embarrassing stuff, But this class trip is really where we start to see the payoff of the growth of who she is as a person. And some of this I feel like has to do with the homeroom teacher who has assigned her as the group leader. As the group leader, she is forced to be out there in a role that she hasn't been in before, and she doesn't really have a way to hide from that. Even though she doesn't want to do it, even though she's dragging her feet, even though she's kind of doing the bare minimum, she's having to be out there, and she can't ditch in the way that she's been able to kind of avoid her classmates and make her situation worse in previous volumes. Also, she's with these people that she's always judged and always cast as others, or there are people that she's forced to be close to in a way that she hasn't in class. In class, she's been able to avoid them, but now she's spending all day, every day with these people, and she's in charge of them as the group leader, more or less. And it's this class trip, if I remember correctly, where Tomoko really starts to realize that, first of all, people aren't that different from her. Everyone struggles with arguments and fights, loneliness, social isolation, and also not everyone is awful. She has this defense mechanism where she quickly judges everyone else. She judges this other girl in her group as like a delinquent, like, oh, she's probably going outside to smoke when she goes outside, which really, as an adult reading the series, you notice this is just a defense mechanism. Tomoko doesn't want to feel her intense feeling of loneliness, social isolation, lack of friendship, so she's just casting these stories or these projections onto other people so she doesn't have to feel the feelings that she doesn't want to feel. If I remember correctly, the class trip is where some of this starts to change. Tomoko starts to open up, and she starts to develop, well, maybe not friendships necessarily right away. She's starting to develop those connections that she needs with other people. And there is a girl in this series in volume 8 who, I believe it is this girl, if I remember correctly, who we get to see some of her internal monologue, and she's like, I don't want to be in this group. I'm only in here because I was fighting with my friends. I don't even want to be here. Why am I here? I don't even like these people. Like, this is a weird girl leading the group. But basically, she's having all these thoughts. And then she suddenly realizes, wait, I haven't made an effort to get to know anyone here. I haven't made an effort to do anything. And it goes to show that it really just takes one person kind of taking the lead and getting out there to really get the ball going. But I feel like all the girls in this group kind of come together, and they're starting to make these connections with one another. And that's what humans crave. They crave connections with one another. And that's why Tomoko is so miserable, even though she puts up a lot of defenses about it, is because she doesn't have the connections that she wants. She wants to have friendships. She wants to have groups that she goes shopping with, or to the beach with, or to talk with, or to have sleepovers with. She wants these things that she claims are stupid and she doesn't want, but she wants these things intensely. She wants the connection with the other people, but she doesn't have it, and then it hurts, so she has defense mechanisms, and then it makes it hurt more, so she has defense mechanisms. And this class trip kind of breaks that cycle, or it's causing some interruptions to that cycle, to that spiraling, to that thought pattern that caused Tomoko to break out of that, and we get to see some growth and some connection. So for those of you who have been powering through and really don't like this series, if I remember correctly, I hope my memory was correct, this class trip is where things start to turn around. I will say volume 8 to date, for me, in this reread, so with just my fresh reread eyes, is probably one of the more positive ones to date. She has those connections, she's starting to make things work, she's starting to build those relationships with other people, even if they might not be called friendships, they are relationships, they're a basis of something to work on going forward for Tomoko, and it's the volumes thus far that has had the most positivity and leaves you feeling the most optimistic when reading it. I do have volume 9 out, so I did get them all at once, and I'm going to be reading volume 9. I have not read volume 9, but I'm excited to see where this series goes. I kind of already know where it goes, but I just remember the class trip being a huge turning point, so I'm excited to see this positivity and optimism. I feel like, if I remember correctly, the darkest days, at least from what I had read, were over, and we were kind of on this growth trajectory that had a little bit more of a positive spin on it, and I really like that. So if you're struggling through, I feel like this is the volume where things get positive, or a little bit more positive. I feel like things are just ever so slightly a little brighter after volume 8, and volume 8 is where we start to see that light come through. If you have any thoughts on volume 8 thus far, series thus far, manga series you think I should be reading, I would love to hear it. Put them in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.